Hey guys, Black Friday's coming up, and instead of going out and buying some virtual instruments, I want you to take a look in your JS folder, because there's actually some unique instruments only made for Reaper that you already have. They're free, and only Reaper users can have them. Let's check them out together. So we are looking at some plugins in the JS Instruments folder. These you will get through ReaPack in the Re-team or the Saike repositories. I'll have links in the description, but by now you should already have ReaPack. You should have everything installed already. Saike Dum Drums. It's pretty fun. I love the interface of this. So I do have a video covering this before. So just a quick kind of reminder of what this is. It's a drum machine. You get a bunch of different kick drums. So slightly different drum machine or drum sounds there with volume, panning, tuning. You can make it velocity sensitive by this little square here. Then the decay time. And I love that the preview thing makes the whole interface shake. So we got a snare, 4 different snares, volume, pan, tuning, and decay time. Clap, cymbal, close hi-hat, open hi-hat, shaker, low tom, medium tom, high tom, rim click, cowbell. It's got that classic 808 cowbell. This is available as a stereo out or as multi-channel out. And when you just load this as a new instrument track, it will give you that option. Let's go on to the next one. We'll keep this in the drum category. JS Drumpad, which is made by Tilr. And let's go to his description of it. JSFX Drumpad synth inspired by VSTs like Microtronic and DSK synth drums. 1 oscillator, 1 noise generator, 3 envelopes, 2 filters, low pass, band pass, high pass, or color controls, distortion, and 1 band EQ. Let's look at the different sections, starting off with the mixer section. So here's the mixer. We can mix between the oscillator, this section, and the noise section, which is over here. We have a pitch envelope and a filter, and we can make it velocity sensitive with this knob. And we have an overall sort of EQ curve. We can increase distortion with this drive control. All right, so right now we're only hearing this oscillator. Let's change the frequency. That sounds good. We can increase the decay time. Change the shape. Soften the attack if we want. I don't think I will. And then we can adjust sort of like a pitch drop or pitch increase. And we can, of course, change the decay for that as well. So if you're going for like those laser toms, you might do something like that, where it's a long decay. For a kick drum, I think we're going to keep this short. Just a little bit to make it a little bit more punchy. So there's with it and without. Just adds a little bit of attack. And so here's the noise source. And we blend that in with the mix control. And depending on how much high frequency you have there in the color control, you know, that cuts through really easily. You hear that little click start. And then overall filter. Oh, and this is set to only the noise, but this can be adjusted to set to both. And we can increase the resonance of this. And based on how much distortion we're getting here, I can see that the filter is before the drive control. So as long as the drive is above 0, the filter is affecting that. And that's pretty fun. This can be used to create synth drums, kicks, snares, toms easily. And there is another version of this plugin. So that's Drumpad. We can change that out for another one called Drumsynth. JS Drumsynth from Tilr. And this is essentially the same, but the difference here is that there's different drum pads. So there's 7 pads, and these are going to be on your white keys of your keyboard. And they're all just kind of set as default right now, but we can load in a kit. Kit 2. And kit 3. Pretty versatile for those synth drum sounds. And this version with the multi-instruments also has multi-channel out. Click here, go to 7 outs. Then that allows you to have individual outputs out to Reaper's mixer, more control over how you process each thing. I really like this one. It's simple. It's kind of lacking some presets right now. I wish there was more presets. Go back to Drumpad. In Drumpad, there are various presets for single sounds. And I'm pretty sure that those are the sounds individually that go out into that kit. All right, moving on from drum sounds, we've got another one from Tilr called J3OSC. Now this one is based off ImageLine's 3X OSC, one of the FL Studio basic synthesizers, but essentially there is 3 oscillators, envelope for amplitude, pitch, filter. There's an overall filter, and we can randomize the phase. So the phase is randomized per each note. So each oscillator has the polarity control, volume, phase detune, coarse and fine tuning, pan control, and what oscillator shape to use, sine, triangle, saw, square, pulse, and noise. There isn't an overall volume control. You just have to manage it through the 3 individual volume controls. There are no presets for this. That's sort of lacking on this, but it's surprisingly versatile. Taking, let's say, 3 saws and blending these in. Let's do 50, 50, and sure, 75. Pan that left, pan that right. Let's do -12 and -12 for these. Just a little bit of detune. So it's already velocity sensitive. I wish we could change the curve of that a little bit, but I generally have to play a little harder than I'm used to. I'm going to enable the arpeggiator on my keyboard. Change this to a pulse. And take that out. 70%. Invert the phase of one of them. Add a bit of phase shift. Clearly, you can make some cool sounds with this. It needs some extra effects. It needs a distortion. It needs reverb and delay, I think, to really make this sound very interesting. But I like it as it is. It's pretty good. We're going to go into a new synth called JSWavesynth. This is a stepping stone to some more complicated synths. This one is a wavetable synth, but it's just a single wave shape. And there's a few different kind of wave shapes built in. It loads with complex 2. There are no presets for this, but it's a pretty simple synth and interesting what it can do. So let's start with saw 1. We have a filter. We have a filter envelope. Envelope for amplitude, and we can adjust the velocity control. How velocity sensitive is it? I'm doing very light velocity there. I think where the most fun comes in is when you start increasing the number of voices up to 8. Immediately, it sounds so much better. There's a bit of detune you can apply here. I think you can get away with like up to 30% on this. And then there's a pan amount. How much spread of each of those voices do you want? You can go up to 100%. And I believe it spreads it symmetrically. So like with 2, you got a left and right panned hard. And then with 3, there's 1 in the middle. That's about it for this one. You can choose different wave shapes. But it's pretty basic in terms of like how you manipulate this, interact with it. But as I said before, this is a stepping stone to other more complicated synths from the same creator. So that was JSWavesynth. JS Additive looks very similar, and it is used in a very similar way. It's got the wavetable. It's got the same voice, detune, panning adjustments that we loved from the previous one. Same pitch, envelope, filter controls. But this one has a harmonic additive synthesis kind of thing. So there's this graph we can kind of draw in different harmonics to add to the sound. And we'll just reload that to reset it. But if you click this little button here, you can go to the next page. There's actually 31 different pages where you can manipulate this now. And if you want to erase this, you can Control-click on Windows, Command-click on Mac, and you can erase that graph. So you can make it more noisy, sort of like metallic sounding. You can kind of generate these much more complex waveforms. I like this waveform called stairs to start with. Let's get the arpeggio going again. Enable the filter. Just a little bit. Let's change that release. Increase the number of voices. Already sounds really cool, but let's mess around with the harmonics. I was doing something with this earlier today that was sort of like these sort of like mineral sounds, I want to say, like hitting rocks and stuff. This is a very powerful way of changing the waveform. And a little of these harmonics goes a long way. You can see it in the waveform. Like every time you put a little click in here, it's going to like add more complexity to that waveform. We can start off with a sine wave, right? And just one little click here adds all this hair to it. You can kind of generate these crystal-like tones. Very interesting. That's JS Additive. I really like that one. In a way, it's similar. In a way, it's much more complex. This one also has the harmonic control. It has all the envelopes that we're kind of used to seeing. It adds in a curve control. There are 4 operators, which are essentially those wavetable thing that we saw in the previous plugin. Then there's this 4x4 matrix where we are modulating the frequency of each of the operators. This one gets kind of complicated because as you're modulating one thing and when you increase the amount of modulation somewhere else, that also influences the modulation you're hearing, even if that particular operator isn't going out to the master. So it is pretty wild. No presets. It really needs some presets because this is a complicated sort of beast to tame, but it is a lot of fun. So let's just start with oscillator 1, operator 1. So it's a sine wave, right? We can modulate operator 1 by itself. So we're changing the pitch so fast. That it becomes noise. But just adding in a little, that makes it interesting. Now what's happening with operator 2? It's again a sine wave, but let's increase its octave by going to sine 2, or we can go to the semitone thing, go up an octave. Operator 2 sounds like this. So it's just an octave up from this. We're going to modulate operator 1 by operator 2 by going to the O2 dial here. So this by this. Again, around 50%, it starts to kind of distort and become noise. So this is the wave shape that we've created. But what if we modulate operator 2 by operator 1, and then we're blending in the result into operator 1 again? This is where it kind of gets complex. Very complex waveforms, right? You can kind of see how it gets complicated where you're using one thing as a modulation source, but then that thing is modulated by itself or another oscillator, and it just gets crazy. Operator 2 is currently set to sine 2, but let's try this as the organ 2 shape. So it's a sine wave with some harmonics. Modulating that by operator 1 has that effect. Listening to operator 1 and modulating it by operator 2 has this effect. So a distinctly different sound. Kind of makes this complex. It makes it kind of time consuming to figure out what to do if you're going for a specific sound. Let's go back to operator 1 and not worry about the FM modulation at all. We can go to the harmonics page. You can kind of increase the complexity of the waveform and see the result in this preview here. By adding harmonics, just like we did in the previous synth, but with only a single page per operator. Again, the controls are the same. You can click to draw a bar. You can drag to create ramps. Hold down the command key to erase. So the more complex the waveform, the more that the frequency modulation is going to kind of get into the noise territory. And that's really only a problem if you're going for something like tonal. If it goes into this sort of noisy territory, it's not really a problem if you're going for more of like a percussion sound. This is a thing that needs some presets to really get the most out of it, just even as starting points, because it's complicated. There's all these different waveforms to start with for each of the operators. There's a modulation matrix and the harmonics that you can add. So there's so much you can do with it, but yeah, have fun. At least have fun with it. All right, moving on from that one, we've got another one from Saike. I think this is an incredible one. It's called Partials. I can't really fully explain what's going on here. Really, this is just to encourage you to try things out. Try out plugins that you might already have installed, you just never looked at. And that's the case with me. I didn't look at any of these plugins before this weekend. Totally different kind of sounds from what we were looking at before. It's sort of like a physical modeling kind of thing, or material modeling maybe. So this is like metal strings. We can change this to a beating, tones combining, that sort of thing. A beam with one end clamped. marimba. Honestly, that's pretty decent marimba tone. There's some voice sorts of vowel shapes. It's a little hard to explain what that even does. Custom shapes where you can actually draw in the kind of the harmonic structure of it. This is tubes. A beam with both ends open. A membrane, like a drum. And a pan. Like a steel drum, pan drum, that sort of thing. There are two different sorts of custom shapes that you can choose. And then there's all these different controls. Like you can trigger this from MIDI, you can trigger this from audio, control the brightness of the sound, relative position. There is a frequency-dependent damping. Sorry, there's frequency-independent damping and frequency-dependent damping. So this one does all frequencies equally, and this one is more like high frequencies first. Inharmonicity. Very weird stuff. Input nonlinearity. Sure about that one. High frequency unison. And this last one is a partial fluctuation. So extremely complex parameters in here. Just explore it. Look at the presets. There's actually a ton of different presets, which I love. This plugin's not complete. He's labeling this as alpha, but there's so many actually usable tones that come in the presets. Let me put on the arpeggiator. All right. So the presets are labeled with MIDI and audio, and if you want to try out any of the ones labeled as audio, you can just drag this control here up to this shape, the spike shape. And it generally works. I really like that this one has this sort of woody character or like a metallic tube character. That's something you don't get with subtractive synths. I think this is probably as simple as a plugin like this can be. If you're afraid of all these weird controls, you know, look through the presets, figure out what your favorites are, and just make some music, I guess. Saike Protosynth. I'm pretty sure this is his newest. Well, this one's another complicated one. Let's break it down into different sections. There are 8 oscillators here in the top section. You can enable each one by a click, just a left click. There are 6 envelopes, 4 mod sources, and each of the oscillators are enabled in pairs and then merged. There's various sort of like math operations you can do. You're summing here, and then summing, and then there's a filter, and then it sums again, and then to another filter, and possibly another filter. And then there is the effects section, which has reverb with a few different kind of modes you can enable. Analog emulation, so adding noise to the oscillators and envelope. Spreader, smear. There are, luckily, lots of presets that we can start with. So let's just start with this one called Big Saw. If we want to change different things, so like where it says add here, we can right click, and then there's additive mixing, amplitude modulation, ring modulation, XOR on diff, convolve, frequency shift, phase mod absolute, and phase mod absolute 2. But I can right click and try things out. So let's just limit this to just first 2 oscillators, which sounds like this by itself. It's oscillator 1, oscillator 2, which are essentially the same with a slightly different tuning and detune amount. When combined, it makes that sound. With amplitude modulation, quite a bit different. Ring mod. XOR. I sometimes have trouble with clicking on the different mode buttons. For each of the oscillators, there is a different type. Let's go back to additive mixing. You can drag in some of the boxes as well. It's too complicated for me. Go through a few presets. All right, and then the very last one, I swear no more after this, Yutani Mono Bass Synth, also by Saike. Again, totally different sort of interface. Kind of have to learn each of these interfaces individually. So this is a little more of a straightforward subtractive synth. If you've used any hardware synths, they're generally kind of set up like this with 3 oscillators, a noise generator, and overall kind of drive control here. Many different filter shapes with a filter morph control, which is pretty neat. Enable the key follow with this knob. Filter frequency modulation, nice to see. Another distortion effect. Amp envelope, filter envelope, LFO for the filter cutoff. LFO for the morph control. A feedback control, another LFO that can be linked to other things. Yeah, just like that. Click on link, drag a knob, and it works. That's pretty cool. You even see it moving there. Awesome. And pitch modulation, there's bonus oscillators. Nice to see. The analog effect, space, so just reverb, and oversampling, and a whole bunch of presets. So let's just go through a few of these presets. So it does that sort of screamy 303 kind of thing. Grab some random stuff. That's a nice one. That's cool. This one I've spent the least amount of time with. There's a ton of presets that you would go through. Generally, tweaking this is kind of straightforward. I just realized that there's a wavetable shape here, but I don't know how to actually change the wavetable. Maybe you can't. Maybe there's just one sort of complex multi-layer wavetable in there. That's all you get. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting things in here, and Saike has done a great job on this one. And that's it. That's about an hour of talking about JSFX Instruments. Not included with Reaper, but exclusive to Reaper, available for free on ReaPack. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Hope you found something cool to use to keep you busy and save you some money during Black Friday and all of that. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Support the Reaper blog through Patreon. Visit reaper.blog for more tutorials.